Hi, and welcome back to Circle Theory. Today we are hopping back into the Black Monday murders as we wrap up with our discussion on the shadow of God. Today we're going to look at some of the starkest contrast within this work. We're going to explore the more powerful themes and how color is used to represent it. So I hope you stick with us here on Circle Theory. So today we pick up with some very powerful imagery. And I highly suggest if you have not read these works, you go and pick them up. I've put links to them online, so I suggest you buy a copy of these novels. But let's hop in, right? So here we're seeing these really powerful reds. We don't see a lot of that in that work, being used to draw the symbols of power, right? We're seeing them used here to represent a connection to that, right? That there's a blood sacrifice, that this energy, we see it black, it's drained here. And we see it covered in grid lines, right? This connection between logic, wealth, and magic really comes into play here. And we see the most color that we ever do on this demigod character, right? We usually see it as a pale white, but here we're overlaid with a bit of a red, this is when it is most connected to its emotional source, I suppose, would be the best way to describe that. Which red is typically in Campbell's work suggested to be a bit of a theme of passion, right? We use this in quite a lot of ways to show love, energy, anger, but here it is a calculated, powerful passion. And we return to our characters from last week, which if you did not catch the last episode, I suggest you go back and take a look, as that will help set the context, or the first video as well. And so now we've entered the realm where our characters are going to get a chance to see the power, right? Like I said in the last video, the power is represented by blue. And here we now see our guardian at the threshold who is able to see from blue, right? We see that tint in the glasses. Great imagery here. And the grays that these characters all had right in the first video, covered in yellows and grays. Now we have a blue tie and a blue shirt. They have now gained a bit of power as they've come into trade. They are now entering, right? They are being able to start to see that his eyes are still largely covered. This is who we're following. Our eyes are opening up with him. We have now reached this power, right? We have the bulbs are bright yellow here. We have reached the illumination of what we've been seeking, right? We see this blue right here brought up again. But as we've seen it in our context, we're brought in to discuss a trade, a sacrifice that we must spend to be able to come in and interact with that. And now we reach our gods, and now contrast just goes galore, right? We have this contrast in height between these characters and eyes of darkness to being able to see. We have our center balancing act where it almost looks and reminds you at this point of the scales of justice, right? And how they are being tipped. We see in the context in anima and animus, as in a Jungian sense, all being able to build up on a layer of this death. I find it interesting that we see this cast with books basically throughout all of that of knowledge, but we can't really get a good grasp on what these texts are. And then on our windows, yet again, which are always so important in showing reflection, we see reds, right? We see now what is removed and away from this is emotion and passion that doesn't exist here in the world. We see purples, we see calm, we see stark contrast, and we see this as the gate of power. In the eyes of our God stare deep into us. And so I like I said, this is extremely powerful, right? From complete power to absolutely none in the death of that. And we have a discussion about gods, right? This is where it gets real gaming-esque, and I adore it. But we have, he's talking about that there have been the other gods who have existed and the praise of believers and offerings of their disciples. But that compact is very, nature is fleeting. For man is fickle and easily confused. So now they're all gone. Their names are forgotten. Prayers lost in either. And all that remains is the divine machinery of the universe and the one true God, he who consumes. That there will always be consumption, right? We see the open mouth, the hungry, consumptive mouth of this God. I am Mammon. And that it is going to be that consumption is an internal force behind the drive of power and wealth, right? It doesn't, I believe the suggestion we're to take here is that it comes from hunger. That at the end of the day, that really what we're looking at here is a God of gluttony. And gluttony is when we are sacrificed. And that's actually what we see happen here. They are given a chance for their payment to be able to speak to our God. But it is his gluttony, right? The taste of power in his eyes, right? They've turned almost purple now. But he can feel the shade being removed where he needs more, and he is pulled back. This is the price. This is where we've seen in this passion and blood brought up through our symbols that truth and death, this is very circular, right? Which is something that we're really into on circle theory. That's kind of the idea here on this channel. So if you like that, please subscribe. And we're going to continue in seeing the inverse of that, which I find this, the inverse is going to do with wealth, right? They didn't have much to pay. They had a single coin. And so they aren't able to access it. We see a real discussion here about the power of wealth and those that are able to hold that in a given society. Because opposing this, we see someone who does have that wealth. And rather than a single coin, they are being fed by the gods. They're being getting almost the kiss from the gods, right? The gods are giving them tribute at this point in a certain sense. They have been able to appease the gods through sacrifice to the point of gaining the status that sacrifice is you and I. I mean, it is what they are able to create through consumption, which that subplot, you have to read the text just for that subplot. I'm telling you, pick it up. And towards the end, and this is where we see some very, very powerful imagery. Our detective comes and meets one who has the power. After he's seen that all, he's ready to have his eyes opened. He has reached the top of the tower. The illumination is shining on him, and his quest has turned to being able to find truth. Which, if you're anything like me, this quest is a dangerous one that tends to ask a lot of us. But he's still looking down. He still can't quite look up and see the sun. Right? He's still a bit in the cave. And I think that's an interesting question to wrap up with. Recently we've talked a lot about Walden on this channel, which would be the opposite of seeking this out, right? Walden suggests that we gain through greens, really, as a color, that we would be able to gain peace through letting that go, all of this. So, I hope that you stick around and check out some of our other channels. If you like this format, I have some other graphic novels that I'd like to talk about, specifically a Batman one that I think would be very good. So let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear your feedback. As always, I hope to catch you next time here on Circle Theory.